Hey everybody, it's Tox from CritsHappen.com. Thanks for watching and welcome back. We're in the game room with a critical review of a new game that I have a print and play version of that has not yet been released from Alderac Entertainment Group called Love Letter. Love Letter is part of a series of games coming out around the universe of the city-state known as Tempest. There is also Courtier, Dominar, and Mercantile, which all have different themes and different play styles to them. But Love Letter is extremely light. How light? This light. It's 16 total cards in the game, and that's it. And it still plays with 2 to 4 players. It's a very quick game, and it only plays in about maybe 15 to 20 minutes, even with a 4-player game. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of things happening all at once. It's very fast-paced, but it's very easy to learn. So as a light filler game, does it hold up? We'll take a look. But before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about the story of Love Letter, because it's really where the game shines. The story involves the Queen. The Queen has been arrested for high treason, and because of that, the princess, heartbroken, has locked herself away in the castle tower. Now, you play one of the suitors of the city-state of Tempest, who wants to court the princess to ease her broken heart. So, through the use of intermediaries inside of the castle, you're going to pass your love letters through them to hopefully get yours to the princess at the end of the day or the end of the round. Now, there's a lot of different things that can happen throughout the course of this quick game to force you to change who holds that love letter, and there's going to be spies and different things like that that are going to try and find out who's holding your love letter to ultimately boot you out of the castle and not get them there. Once the princess has read enough of your love letters, which varies depending on the number of players in the game, then she will have fallen in love and become smitten with you, and she will allow you to court her, and thus you'll win the game. That, in a nutshell, is Love Letter. So let's take a look at how the game plays, then we'll show you a little bit deeper look at the characters and all the cards involved. Since there's only 16, it won't take too long. And then we'll come back and we'll tell you our final opinions. But for now, let's enter the castle, let's write the best prose we can, and hope that we can get it to the princess to soothe her heart. Before we get into the characters in Love Letter in detail, I'd like to show you a little bit about the gameplay mechanics. Now, it's very, very easy to pick up. In fact, it's so simple you could probably learn it in 5 minutes. So let's see how fast we can do this. Don't laugh, I know the back of these have a different card from a different game, but it was all I had to make sure the print and play copy was sturdy enough to play with. So essentially what happens, and I'm going to show you a 2-player game, you would shuffle up the deck, you would then remove 1 card from play from the top of the deck. Now in a 2-player game, you're also going to take 3 cards, place them face up and out of play. These will not be used, but it's a way for you and your opponent to thin down the deck and move the round very quickly. So in this case we have the Baron, the Princess herself, and the Handmaiden who are out of the round. So they will not come into effect. And when we show you the characters, we'll explain a little bit more about the princess and why she's actually in the deck. Then each player would draw 1 card. Now, for the purposes of this, I'm going to flip these over and show you what they are. Now, 1 player has the guard and 1 player has the countess. The goal of the game is at the end of the round, still be in the round and have the highest value intermediary carrying your love note or love letter in your hand. So right now, if the round were to end, the Countess player would win because they have a 7 and the guard has a 1. But of course, that's not the end of the round. The end of the round is when you're either done with this deck all the way through once, or everyone else but 1 player has been eliminated. So, what happens on a player's turn? Well, let's assume the guard goes first. The guard draws 1 card from the top of the deck. In this case, they get the Prince. Now to show you a little bit about these cards, the guard says, name a non-guard card and choose another player. If that player has the card, he or she is out of the round. Now, I have no idea that this player has the Countess, so I could just be taking a crapshoot right now. Or it does say, from the Prince, choose any player, including this player, to discard his or her hand and draw a new card. So I think what I will actually do is play the prince. The prince says, choose a player, I'll choose myself, discard his or her hand, and draw a new card. So I'll discard the guard in front of me. Now the players all see this, so they know what cards have been played. And then I would draw a new card, and I would get a priest. So while it's not a 5 from the prince, it's not a 1 from the guard, and it's not too bad. So I would go ahead and hold on to that. The countess would then take her turn. She would draw a card, which in this case is the king, which is very, very bad for the countess player. Now, the king has a value of 6, so he's lower than the countess. That's 7. However, the countess says if you have this card and the king or the prince in your hand, you must discard this card. So I would have to discard this card and keep the king in my hand. So the king is still very good because he's a 6-point value. But here's one of the fun things about Love Letter. Maybe I discarded the countess as a bluff. Maybe I did that to make my opponent think I had a king or a prince. They don't know. They have no idea. But let's take one more round and we'll show you what happens. So this player has a priest. They would draw their card and they would have a handmaiden that says until your next turn, ignore all effects from a player's cards. The priest says look at another player's hand. Well, I want to call this person's bluff because I don't think that they had the king or the prince. So I'm going to discard the priest, which is good for me because it still means I have a 4 in my hand. It also means I get to see what's in their hand. So it would be revealed only to me, and I would see that it's a 6-point king. So in fact, they weren't bluffing, and they did have the king. So now I know all the cards that have been played, except for this one that was removed out of the game. I know that my opponent is beating me with a 6, and I have a 4, and we'll have to take another turn and see what happens. So the king would then draw a card, and the king would get the Baron. The Baron says you and another player secretly compare hands. The player with the lower value is out of the round. Well, guess what I know? At this point, I know I have a 6, a 3, and the 8, the princess, has already been removed from the game. There's only one copy of the princess and one copy of the countess and one copy of the king. So if I play the Baron and have to share values with another player, I know that I'm going to have the higher value at the king. I would then share values. I would see that this player has a 4, so they would be out of the round. I would be the only player left, and I would get 1 point for my king delivering my love letter to the princess, and we would shuffle up and do it all again. Now, that was just an example of a 2-player game. You can play this in 3 and 4 players as well, and it moves very, very quickly. In a 3 and 4 player game, you do not remove these 3 cards to the top out of the way, but you still do remove 1 card from the top of the deck. So, let's take a second and we'll show you some of the characters in detail that are included in Love Letter. Now, the cards in Love Letter each represent a different intermediary or helper. The game begins by shuffling all the cards, removing the top card of the deck from the game, and then dealing 1 card to each player. This card is the person who is currently carrying their love note to the princess. And each turn, each player must draw 1 card from the top of the deck and play 1 card in front of them. The goal is to be the person with the highest value intermediary in their hand at the end of the round, which will result in that person delivering your love letter and gaining you a point. Depending on the number of players, when you reach a certain point level, the princess has read enough of your love letters to let you court her and you win the game. Each character in Love Letter has a different effect when played in front of you. That generally happens that one time. So let's take a look at all the characters that make up the intermediaries who can or could be carrying your love letter to the princess. First, you have 5 guards. And of course, these are the lowest in the game at level 1. They're furthest from the princess at the front of the gate, so to speak. And of course, they're suspicious of everyone in the castle. And if they seek correctly, they will eliminate opponents from the round. They say, name a non-guard card and choose another player. If that player has that card, he or she is out of the round. So if you are able to understand or know through some other means in the game what someone is holding in their hand or who it is that's holding that person's love letter, you could name that card and boot them out of the round. And if everyone but yourself is out of the round, then you of course will win and get your love letter to the princess that turn. Next are the priests. The priests have a value of 2. And the priests are, of course, pious, so while they see what's happening around them, they tend not to get mixed up in the affairs of others. But they can provide you information for a well-timed guard or others. The priest says, look at another player's hand. So if these were my two starting cards, let's say I had the priest as my card that was dealt to me and I drew a guard off the top of the deck, I could use the priest on my first turn discarding him and finding out what my opponent had in their hand, and then hopefully when it comes around to me, use my guard to name that card and force them out of the round. Now additionally, there are two barons in the game. The barons with a value of 3, who are of course fickle, and when played will eliminate the person with the lower hand value from the round. They say you and another player secretly compare hands. The player with the lowest value is out of the round. So you would want to discard the Baron when you have a high card in your hand to make sure that your opponent that you've chosen will have a lower card in their hand. Next, there are 2 copies of the Handmaiden. The Handmaiden has a value of 4. There's 2 of them in the game, and they are of course looking out for the princess's best interests, and will thus protect your love letter for a turn to ensure its safety. So until your next turn, ignore all effects from other players' cards. You can play that in front of you and not have to worry about anyone for the next round affecting you. Now, in the good city-state of Tempest, as with all good royal intrigue games, there are 2 princes vying for the crown. And they are, of course, looking for new ways to achieve victory, so they will allow you or force another to discard their hand and draw a new card. And it says, choose a player, including yourself, to discard his or her hand and draw a new card. So, depending on what's been played, this could be a very timely, advantageous card to use. Now, once we're done with the prince, there is only 1 copy of each remaining card. So after the princes, we get to the king. The king has a value of 6, and he's very mercantile and trades hands with an opponent. If it provided enough information from his priests, the king can easily ensure that the suitor of his choice will benefit. He says trade hands with another player of your choice. So if you know that someone else has a 7 or 8 point card from your priest, and again time it very well, could be very, very good and very beneficial for you. Next is the 7 value countess, who has the ear of the princess, but if spotted by the king or one of the princes, will be shuffled off far away from her. She says, if you have this card and the king or the prince in your hand, you must discard this card. So if someone discards the countess, there's a chance they're just bluffing and they wanted you to think they have a prince or a king, or they really do have a prince or a king. Either way, she's a great card to have because of her value of 7 being almost right next to the princess, but is risky in terms of the bet that you have to place. Finally, there is the 8 value princess herself. She's beautiful and yearning for a suitor to heal her broken heart, but if anyone diverts her attention, she'll be removed from the round, or she'll remove you from the round. She says, if you discard this card, you are out of the round. So if someone forces you to discard her, it's game over. She goes back into her tower and another suitor is going to get their love letter to her. So as you can see, there's a lot of flavor with Love Letter. The artwork, even for a print and play, fits the theme very well. It's light enough but detailed enough to give you a royal feel. And the gameplay is extremely, extremely fast. Since there's only 8 types of characters to learn, once you're familiar with it, the action moves faster than a court jester who just insulted the king. So let's take a second and back out, and we'll give you our final thoughts on Love Letter. So that is Love Letter. It's an extremely light game, and something that can be played very quickly, maybe even in between other games while you're having a larger game night. Hopefully, in between other games like Courtier, Mercantile, or Dominar. But, what do we think about it? Well, it's not very strategically deep. It's a little bit of luck and a little bit of timing. It's very big on bluffing, knowing when to play what and who else has played other cards. Since everything is discarded face up, and even in a 2-player game, everything is face up, including the cards that are removed from the game, except for that very first card off the top of the deck. If you're a good card counter, and let's face it, there's only 16, so it can't be that hard, you can pretty much tell what's happening as the game progresses. But because it's so fast, it's kind of hard to keep track. We've played a lot of games of this already, both in 2 players and in 4-player mode, and it's fun in both ways. 2 players goes really quick. You can actually finish a full game of 2 players in about 5 to 10 minutes, which is kind of nice because it's a quick way to just throw things down and start fooling around. What we actually had the most fun with, and me personally had the most fun with, is when we played our cards, putting a little bit of a story arc to it. Taking the time to say, I'm going to play this guard, and I'm discarding it, and I'm going to name the priest. And I'm naming the priest because I've seen him shifty in the corners, and I think that he may be up to something. There's always something you can add to the flavor of the game. Now, while that's completely optional, it's just something that we've had a good time with. It's a big thing in our games of Gloom when we play that, and we found it to be a big part of playing with Love Letter and being able to add that flavor to it. In terms of strategy, there's really not too much because, again, once you know all 16 cards, it's a matter of knowing what you have in your hand, taking a best guess or calculating what your opponents have in their hand, and then going ahead and playing the cards that best suit you or best put you in the position of winning the game. So overall, it's not a crit of a game, but it's not a miss of a game. It falls very nicely right into the hit category. It's something that's light, it's something that's easy to teach, it's something that has a fun story wrapped around it, and actually lends itself to the other games that are going to be coming out for the rest of the city-state of Tempest in this entire universe, but will provide you a lot of fun for a short amount of time. The nice thing about it too is because it is so small and it's only these 16 cards, it's very easy to stick inside of a tuck box and take with you. You know, a woman could put this in her purse, a man could put it in his merce, or just put it in their pocket and be able to go, which is nice. You could be out at a bar, you could be out at a friend's house, you could be at a party, or you could be in a movie theater line, and take it out and start playing really quickly. So that's a very nice advantage as well. Alderac definitely done a very good job of wrapping a very deep story around these 4 games coming out, and Love Letter is a nice inclusion to that mix. So overall, we're going to give it a hit. But until next time, we hope you have fun delving around inside of the castle, writing the best romance you can for the princess, and getting your love letters to her to soothe her heart. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Feel free to leave your comments here on the YouTube channel. You can, of course, find us online at Twitter, at Facebook, and at Google+, and of course at our homepage at critshappen.com. But until next time, keep writing those love letters, keep rolling those dice, and we hope they're all crits.